All right. So, sorry, new headset, so I had to adjust where it was lying. But welcome to United Astronomy Clubs of New Jersey. We are back here once again in Jenny Jump State Park in Hope, New Jersey. So, since it looks like people are just coming down and getting their chairs settled, I do want to welcome not only those who have joined us here on site, but also those who are joining us online, because that is right, we do live stream these to Twitch and YouTube. So if you're on there, do hit those like and subscribe. If you're here and you're looking for something fun to watch on a Saturday because you're rained out because it's New Jersey in the summer, of course it's going to be raining on a Saturday, you could always feel free to online and have the speaker scare me. With that, you can also check us out on our website, uacnj.org. It's where you're going to find a list of all our upcoming speaker presentations, what day they're happening. This week we had a little bit of a mix-up because, unfortunately, as we all know, life does get in the way sometimes. You can also check us out on our social media. That's also a great place to ask any questions, get in touch with us, and know what's any special fun events that are happening. In addition, like I said, those socials are Facebook, Instagram. We got a Discord server. Ask your questions there. So for the people here, just a brief safety overview. If you need to use the restroom, that is the porta potty in the back to my left, your right. Yes, that is still correct. It hasn't changed from last time, despite my brain saying it did. We also have a museum and gift shop area. Is that me? Yep, that is me again. Perfect. That we have a little museum and meteorite display there. Great things to check out. I'll be manning that after the talk because unfortunately they won't allow me to break the laws of physics and be in two places at once. It looks like a couple of our volunteers might have their telescopes set up. I don't know if we have any observatories open because unfortunately I'm not wearing my distance glasses tonight. But if you see one of those sheds with the roof rolled off, that is open and a volunteer is manning that telescope, and feel free to ask them questions and ask what they're looking at. Or in some of our astronomers' cases, photographing. When we go to leave, we do ask that you use your headlights, because as much as we love our night vision, we love not being a frog or splat in the road. It's no fun. Been there, done that. 0 out of 10. Would not recommend. Let's avoid those medical bills. That being said, it is a state park. It does get dark, although I think we're in a full moon situation right now.
Almost, yeah.
So it might not be as dark, but if we are using a flashlight to get around or fumble with our keys in the dark, because I know that happens to me all too frequently, do try and keep those lights pointed towards the ground, just because we don't need to accidentally blind people trying to do sick lightsaber moves with the flashlights. That gets a little bit old. So, you're not here to hear me blabber on forever. You're here to learn about Glass Giant's extremely large telescopes. And this presentation is given by none other than Kevin Conod. Kevin is the former astronomer for he is the current astronomer for the County College of Morris and has graduated from Stony Brook University in 1989 with a Bachelor of Science degree in astronomy. He is actively involved in the local astronomy clubs such as UACNJ here, and are you still serving as president of NJAG?
Oh, actually, I just finished.
He's apparently done with that. That is someone else now. But since 1999, he has written the popular Jersey Skies column for NewJersey.com, which can be viewed on Jersey's Best, where I believe we still share that on our Facebook, right?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Perfect. So another great reason to check us out on our Facebook. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to you,
Sure.
Kevin, and
Yep.
the white line denotes where you can actually be seen.
Yes. Right. Okay, great. Good evening. We're going to be talking about uh, big telescopes. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of telescopes, and we'll take a look at some of the really big giants that are in use right now and being built as well. Along the way, if anybody has questions, feel free to interrupt. And of course, as many people know that one of the first people to turn a telescope onto the nighttime sky was Galileo. Keep in mind that Galileo did not invent the telescope, but he was one of the first people to point it at the nighttime sky. And so he really discovered an amazing amount of things. He was the first person to see craters on the moon. He was the first person to see the moons of Jupiter. He pointed his telescope at the Milky Way and realized that it was made of stars, and so made a lot of really amazing telescope discoveries with a relatively simple telescope. Back then in the year 1610, the largest telescopes in the world were only about this big, only about an inch wide. They didn't have very much magnification, maybe about 14 power. Galileo's first telescope was about 14 power or so, not a very big telescope. But he was able to discover all kinds of really interesting things with this little two little pieces of glass here put together. And so this was quite an amazing thing, and he became famous for all these discoveries they made with this little telescope. And over time, people tried to build bigger and bigger telescopes, improve the designs of these telescopes, but it took quite a while for them to develop. They didn't quite understand optics really quite that well, and so it was difficult for them to build bigger telescopes. There was one astronomer named Hevelius, and he ended up building a 5-inch telescope. It was about 5 inches in diameter, and he made the first atlas of the moon. And he became very interested in building bigger and bigger telescopes. I think his biggest telescope was about 8 inches in diameter, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it was almost 150 feet long. He took this gigantic tube thing and built this giant telescope, which is, you can imagine, it was very difficult to use something that big. So people were building these telescopes with lenses for quite some time. Finally, though, Isaac Newton came around much later in the 17th century, 1668. He builds the first telescope using mirrors. And so this is the very first reflecting telescope. It also was really quite small, about an inch and a third across in diameter. But he finally starts to understand optics fairly well, and he builds this little telescope, and this is a Newtonian type telescope named after him. And these types of designs are really very nice. They're very simple to build, so even amateur astronomers use this design even today. And we've got a couple here on the hill that use the Newtonian design. And so this is something that's still in use today. A lot of beginners used Newtonian telescopes, and they're very nice design. You've got two mirrors in there that will collect light and focus it. And that's really the basic job of a telescope. Is not just magnification, it's collecting light. And so if you want to learn more about the universe, you really got to build a bigger telescope. You need bigger optics in order to collect more light so that you can see things better and see things just to see things better. This is does anyone know who William Herschel is? Have you heard his name? William Herschel is famous for having discovered Uranus. And you might wonder, well, what kind of astronomer was he, and where did he learn about astronomy? Actually, he wasn't an astronomer at all. He was a musician. He was born in Germany. He moved to England and became a famous performer. A lot of people knew who William Herschel was, so you can kind of think of him as the Beyonce of his day or something like that. But somewhere along the way, he becomes interested in astronomy, and he's had a very successful career, and he's fairly, I guess, relatively wealthy, and he decides that he wants to learn how to build his own telescopes. And at that point, these telescopes, the reflecting telescopes, they didn't have glass mirrors yet. They were made out of metal. And so he designs or comes up with a new formula for making metal mirrors, and he starts building telescopes of his own. And there he is in his backyard. Here's his 7-foot long telescope, about 6 inches in diameter. So not very large, but this is big enough that he's able to discover the planet that we know today as Uranus. And he actually thought that he was going to name it after his patron. He was going to name it after King George. But the French didn't like that, and other people in Europe didn't like that, naming a planet after a king. So eventually, they settled on Uranus was a much better name for it that everyone could accept. And this was discovered in 1778. So 1778, he discovers Uranus with this little telescope. But he's not satisfied with that. He wants bigger telescopes. And so he goes on and he builds a couple of, built a 12-inch, and then I think he builds a 28-inch. And this is his biggest telescope. He builds a telescope that's 40 feet long. It's 48 inches in diameter. And this is really quite large. It's so large that you need this big scaffolding system to move it around, to point it at different things in the sky. So as you imagine, you'd have to have a whole bunch of people helping you with this. And so using a telescope this size, it was pretty involved. You have to have a couple of people helping you, pulling on pulleys and ropes and things like that. But this is this point is the biggest telescope in the world, from 1789 all the way to 1815. This 48-inch diameter telescope is the largest in the world. And so Herschel's doing this work on his big telescopes, and so he's a very well-known astronomer at that point. But other telescopes there are quite a few other telescopes that are still using lenses as well, and so here we have what's known as the Great Dorpat refractor. It was built in 1824 in Estonia by an optical or telescope builder named Joseph von Fraunhofer, and he designs a 9.5-inch lens that is really excellent quality, has some really nice properties, and this is the largest refractor in the world at this point, 9.5 inches in diameter. It also is the first telescope to have an equatorial mount, and so this works a lot better for a telescope because it can track the sky. It's lined up to the North Star, and so it can turn and track things through the sky as the Earth turns. And a lot of the telescopes here at Jenny Jump are equatorial designs that can track the sky, and so this was the first time that this was used for a telescope. And so there's a big innovation, not a huge telescope, but lots of innovation here in this particular telescope. And so this is very fondly remembered as a groundbreaking telescope. Then 1845, a gentleman named Lord Rosse in Ireland, he becomes interested in astronomy and building telescopes, and he decides he's going to build the biggest telescope in the world. And this eventually becomes known as the Leviathan of Parsonstown. And so here he is. He's got a castle, Burr Castle. He owns the castle. He's got this big piece of property. And so this telescope is so large they had to build 2 walls to support it. It's got 2 walls, and it's called the scaffolding on it to help raise and lower the telescope and point it at different parts of the sky. And so this is 72 inches in diameter. Oh, okay. Well, every time I speak louder, it crackles. So I'm gonna. Well, I don't know what to do about that. Yeah. This is the Leviathan of Parsonstown. It's 72 inches in diameter. From 1845 all the way to 1917, this is the biggest telescope in the world. And as he's looking at the sky, this is 72 inches is really an incredibly large size, and he's able to see details in nebulas that no one else had seen before. And so he's looking at various nebulas in the sky, and some of the nebulas he looked at have a spiral shape to them. And of course, they didn't realize what this was at the time, but he was looking at galaxies and actually seeing galactic structure with this 72-inch diameter telescope. So this was able to reveal quite a bit of detail that no one else had seen before. So this is quite an amazing instrument. Unfortunately, it's located in Ireland. They don't really have the greatest of weather there. You get lots of cloudy weather in Ireland, and so, but he's able to see some pretty amazing things. Meanwhile, in the United States, they kind of lagged behind in terms of building large telescopes. Most of the telescopes that were used here in the United States were from Europe. So at some point, Harvard decides that they want a big telescope, and so they build the largest telescope in the United States. 1847, for about 20 years, this 15-inch refractor is the largest telescope in the country, built by a German firm called Merz and Mahler. And so this is at Harvard, and so that's the largest telescope in the U.S. here at that time. Along comes a young man named George Ellery Hale, and he becomes interested in astronomy as a young man, and his father wants to encourage him. His father is very wealthy, and so that comes in real handy for George, because he does get interested in building some large telescopes, and so he decides that the United States deserves to have a really big telescope, even bigger than the 15-inch at Harvard. And so 1897, the Yerkes Observatory is established in Wisconsin, and he goes and he builds a refractor that even today is the largest refractor. It's 40 inches in diameter. And this is built by the American famous telescope maker here in Massachusetts. Alvin Clark builds this 40-inch monster, and it's really a huge telescope. And Yerkes uses this telescope and other telescopes to become the birthplace of modern astrophysics, and they do all kinds of great research with these telescopes. And so he finishes this 40-inch refractor. If I remember the story correctly, his father decides to buy him a birthday present. And what does he buy his son? He buys him a disc of glass that's 60 inches across. And he says, okay, here's your birthday present. Go build another telescope that's even bigger than the one you just finished. And so they find a spot in California, Mount Wilson. So here's the Mount Wilson Observatory in California. And so they start building this telescope. And in 1908, they finished the telescope, and this is 60 inches in diameter, so 20 inches larger than the big refractor in Wisconsin. And so here we have a 60-inch telescope, about 1.4 meters in diameter. So this is a big advance in telescope technology. They can do a lot of research with this size telescope. Now, that's great, 60 inches, that's a big scope, but, George Hale is not really done. He wants to build stuff that's even bigger than this. And they find a wealthy donor, and in 1917, they finish a telescope that's now known as the Hooker telescope, after the person who donated the funds for it. And it's 100 inches in diameter, 2.5 meters. And so this is gigantic. This is 100 inches, first telescope to reach this kind of size. And so so we have 100 inches in diameter, and so this is larger than anything else that had existed. That anyone ever even thought people didn't even imagine that you could build a 100-inch diameter telescope, but there it is. And so they're able to image galaxies with it. They're able to see, fantastic amounts of detail inside of galaxies, and they're using photography at this point to record some of these objects and study them. So this was a big advance in technology back then in 1917. So this is great, 100-inch diameter telescope, largest in the world from 1917 all the way up to 1948. And it's still in use today. Both the 60-inch and the 100-inch are still both in use at Mount Wilson. So this was quite an accomplishment, but still George Ellery Hale was not quite done. He had one last project in him, and that's to build a telescope that's twice as big as this. And so they start working on the telescope that is now named after him, the Hale telescope, nicknamed the Giant Eye, at Palomar Observatory in California. And this takes a long time to build. It takes about 12 years to build. World War II interrupts things, but it is finally opened, finished and opened in 1948. And so this is the giant 200-inch mirror diameter telescope, 5 meters in diameter. And so this is twice as big as the world's largest telescope just a few years before. So this is really quite a large telescope. And so here's a beautiful shot from the telescope. It's big enough at this point. You've got a large enough aperture that they finally can do some really decent color photography. And so this is the Lagoon Nebula, which is in the summer sky right now. And so a beautiful shot there. So the Palomar telescope, the Palomar Observatory, the Hale telescope, really becomes one of the most productive telescopes in history. They're taking all kinds of images and looking at the spectrum of stars and galaxies and that sort of thing. And so there's just an incredible amount of work being done there at this particular observatory. Some of you may recognize the name of Edwin Hubble. Edwin Hubble is working at Palomar Observatory, and he starts measuring the distances to stars. And he finds some stars in the constellation, in the galaxy of Andromeda, and he's able to measure the distance and find out the distance of that galaxy is about 2 million light years. And so this was kind of the moment that people kind of really realized how big the universe is. So this is like 1925. People are finally understanding how big the universe is. Before 1925, they knew it was big. They weren't really sure how big it was. And they realized, wow, the universe is really gigantic. And so we've only known the size of the universe for about 100 years. That's kind of interesting. It's only relatively recently we discovered the size of the universe. So that is the largest telescope in the world for quite a long time. Well, the Russians were not too happy about that. They thought, well, we know how to build things. Let's build something that's even bigger. And so in 1975, they opened this telescope, the BTA-6. It's in the Caucasus Mountains in Russia. And this is BTA, the 6 in BTA-6 is 6 meters. So they decided to build a telescope 6 meters in diameter. And so this is just a little bit larger than the Hale, 238-inch mirror. Unfortunately, the mirror suffers from a lot of cracking. It has to be replaced. The site that they've picked for the observatory, it's not the greatest of sites. And so this telescope, even though it's slightly larger than the Hale, never really is as productive as the Hale telescope. The Hale telescope remains one of the biggest and best telescopes right through the 1970s and 80s. And finally, the Hale telescope is exceeded, though, in the early 90s. In 1993 and 1996, we build the Keck telescopes. And the Keck telescopes become the largest telescopes in the world. They're based on Mauna Kea. They're on the top of the volcano there in Hawaii. And so these are really monster telescopes. Diameter 10 meters in diameter. So almost 394 inches. So this is almost double the size of the Hale telescope. And the trick to building telescopes this this big is you have to, instead of trying to build a single piece of glass, you can make segments, little segments, and like a puzzle piece, you can put all the pieces together. And so you can build a big mirror out of these little segments. And so in this case, they have 36 segments. Each segment is 1.8 meters across, and it's shaped like a hexagon, and it's all pieced together. And so that's one of the tricks that we've come across to building a really large telescope, is to build it in pieces and then put it together. And so this is a big advance in size, and they of course build two of them kind of side by side. And since the two telescopes are side by side, for some objects you can use them together. And so when you join them together, they have much more resolution. And so when you use them together as a single instrument, they have the equivalent of about a mirror that's about 85 meters in diameter, or 279 feet in diameter. So it kind of acts like a much larger telescope. And so this is a really successful project, and that continues to be used on top of Mauna Kea. So there's the Keck telescopes that have been in operation. And here's just a few examples. Here are a couple of pictures from the Keck telescopes. I've got a beautiful shot of Saturn there. That's an infrared image, and so you're seeing that's why the colors look a little odd. An infrared image of Saturn, picture of Jupiter there, and also of Neptune there as well. Is that actually Neptune, or actually it might be Uranus there? And it's the resolution is high enough that you can actually see storm systems on this planet. So it's almost like the equivalent of a space telescope type resolution from the ground. And so this is really a great piece of equipment that can be used to study all of these objects out there in the universe. So very interesting project. And there's so that's the largest telescope in the world at that point. 1997, people at the McDonald Observatory down in Texas, they want to build a large telescope, and this telescope has a very specific focus. It wants to look at light. Just look at the light from stars and galaxies and that sort of thing. So they look at the spectrum of the light. So that's what they're doing. They're not really interested in taking pretty pictures. They're interested in making measurements. And so they build a special telescope just for this. It's the Hobby Eberly telescope at McDonald Observatory. And it's kind of an unusual design. The telescope mirror, again, built in segments. There are 91 different segments that are put together, and it forms a mirror that's about 9.2 meters in diameter. So it's about the equivalent of 362 inches. And so this can scan little bits of the sky and take spectrums of different objects here. And so that's what this telescope does, a very specialized telescope. And so this is built in Texas, and it's really quite successful. And so, the design is really interesting. Some other universities are interested in this design, and they decided to build a copy. So they built an almost exact copy down in South Africa. And so this is called the SALT telescope, the South African Large Telescope, and that's built in 2005. And actually, Rutgers University has is a part owner of this telescope, and they can use this telescope for their research. So that's the SALT telescope down in South Africa, also a fairly large telescope. Another project that was started is the Gemini Observatory project. And so what they wanted to do is they wanted to be able to have a fairly large telescope, but they wanted to look at the whole sky. And the only way you can do that is to build two observatories. And so they build one in the north. So they pick Mauna Kea. It's a great observing site. They build one of the Gemini observatories. The north one is the one that's built first, opens in 1999. The second one is built in Chile, and it's an almost identical copy, and that opens the following year in 2000. And so this is great. The telescopes are not huge, but they're big. They're 8.1 meters in diameter, equivalent of 319 inches. And the advantage here, of course, is you can look at the entire sky with the two observatories. That's why, of course, they're called Gemini. It's a twin scopes that can look at the sky here. And so there you go. That's the Gemini telescopes. So that's an interesting project. Another really interesting project, the Europeans, they wanted to build their own telescope. And so they came up with this really interesting design. Around the year 2000, this starts operating. It's called the Very Large Telescope, VLT. Not a very original name for a telescope, but it's built at the Parnell Observatory down in Chile. And the interesting thing about this particular telescope system is that it's made up of four. So they build 8.2 meter telescopes. They make four of them and set them up at this observatory, equivalent, each one equivalent of about 323 inches in diameter. And so the nice thing about this particular telescope, they also added four smaller telescopes that could be used. But the really nice thing about this particular telescope observatory system is that it can be all used together. They can gang them together so that all the telescopes work as a single telescope. And so when you do that, you get the equivalent of a telescope that's 130 meters in diameter, about 426 feet. So you get very high resolution from this telescope. So one of the interesting projects that they were able to do with this particular telescope is they were able to look at the center of the Milky Way. So we're able to point their telescopes towards the constellation Sagittarius, and they were able to look at stars, and they were able to watch how these stars move, how they orbit around the center of the galaxy. And they discovered that, here at the center of the galaxy, 26,000 light years away, these stars are orbiting something, and that something weighs 4 million suns. And so what is it? It's a black hole. There's a supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy. It weighs 4 million suns, and we know it because you can watch these stars orbiting around it. And so, so that was really cool. They were able to kind of figure out that there's a supermassive black hole, and they figure out exactly where it is. And so, really cool. It turns out that this is very common. It seems like most galaxies have supermassive black holes at the center of them. And so that's here in our own Milky Way, 26,000 light years away from us. Fortunately, not too close. Not something we have to worry about, but there it is, right at the center of the Milky Way. So that's pretty cool. Speaking of multiple telescopes, another project, really interesting project, which is completed in 2008. This is the Large Binocular Telescope. This is on Mount Graham in Arizona. And so you've got two telescopes. Each one is 8.4 meters in diameter, about 331 inches. And they're like a pair of binoculars. They're right next to each other in the same observatory. And so you got them side by side. So this is the equivalent of a telescope that's almost 12 meters in diameter, about 465 inches. Has a resolution of a telescope that's 23 meters in diameter. So this at the moment is the largest telescope in the United States, in the continental United States, is the Large Binocular Telescope here. So that's the largest telescope in the continental United States. So who has the title at this point? Who has the title of the biggest telescope in the world? Well, that title belongs to an observatory that was created by Spain, and a couple other countries got together and built this big telescope in the Canary Islands. And so this is the Gran Telescopio. And so 2009, this observatory steals the title for the biggest telescope in the world, and right up to today, this is the biggest telescope in the world. 10.4, so just a little bit larger than the Keck telescopes, equivalent of about 410 inches in diameter, and so this is the world's largest single telescope, and that's been in operation, as I said, since 2009. And so that has the title. And here's a little sample. Here's a nice shot of the Dumbbell Nebula. So this is an object that is visible in the summertime sky, a very popular object for amateur astronomers. And this is a nice, these types of nebulas are really nice to study because the sun eventually will become a nebula like this at the end of its life. A sun-like star, when it reaches the end of its life, it puffs off some of its outer layers, and there you get this nice puff of gas left behind. And so there's the dumbbell image, a nice image from the Gran Telescopio, largest telescope in the world. And so there it is. We actually just had a new telescope just came online just a couple of weeks ago. This is the Vera Rubin Observatory down in Chile. And Vera Rubin, a lot of people don't know her name, unfortunately. She was, back in the 70s, she was studying galaxies and studying how galaxies rotate. And she realized there was something not quite right the way with how galaxies rotated. And she realized that there's kind of hidden mass in those galaxies. And so it's called dark matter. We call it dark matter. So she discovers or provides some of the best evidence we have of dark matter existing out there in the universe. And a lot of people thought that she should have won the Nobel Prize for that, but she didn't. And some people feel like she got passed over. But this was nice that this observatory is going to continue some of her work in the search for dark matter. And so it was named after her, the Vera Rubin Observatory. And so this just started operating just a couple of weeks ago. They released some of the first images. And so this is not a huge telescope by today's standards. It's certainly not going to take the title for the biggest telescope, but still it's quite big, 8.4 meters in diameter. One thing you'll notice about it is it's really wide, but it's really short. It's like a little fire plug of a telescope. This telescope is really designed to image as much of the sky as possible, have a nice big wide field and capture as much of the sky as possible. And so this is a survey telescope, and it's going to be scanning the sky using this big wide field and scan across the sky. And it's just going to, that's all it does. It just goes across the sky scanning every single night. And so in about 3 nights, it can map the entire sky from that location in Chile. And that's one of the amazing things about this telescope is not necessarily its size, but the camera that it's using. Here's the camera. This is the largest digital camera ever built, and you can see the guy standing next to it. It's like the size of a car, the size of an SUV. There, it's a huge camera. I'm trying to remember the size of it. I think it's the equivalent of like 3,000 megapixels, something like that. But it's the largest digital camera ever built, and so it's going to be taking these enormous high resolution pictures. And so every night it's going to collect about 20 terabytes of data. So, imagine you probably have a 1 terabyte drive at home. Imagine 20 of those filling up every single night. And so there's a huge amount of data going to be flooding out of this telescope over the next 10 years. So they're going to be surveying the entire sky from that location for 10 years. And so this enormous amount of data is kind of like trying to drink from a fire hose. This is a huge project, a huge survey project. And just then within a few nights that it was operating, they've already discovered like 2,000 asteroids with it. And so it's going to be quite an incredible piece of equipment. And they just released, just a short while ago, released the first images. Here's one they like to call the treasure box. And so they pointed the telescope at the constellation Virgo, which is visible in the sky now. And there's lots of galaxies. There's a big galaxy cluster in Virgo. And so they were able to get this beautiful image. This is actually only a little piece of the image. The actual image is gigantic. And so if you go onto the Rubin Observatory website, you can look at this and zoom in and kind of zoom around. And it's really quite impressive. You've got lots of galaxies here. I believe the full image, I think, has 10 million. I think it has 10 million galaxies in it, if I remember correctly. So this is a really amazing digital camera. And so there's one of the first images from the Rubin Observatory, the treasure box. Check that out online. They also released a very nice image of a couple of very familiar summertime objects. Amateur astronomers love to look at the Trifid Nebula and the Lagoon Nebula this time of year. And so you have this beautiful shot. The Trifid Nebula is the one on the upper right over here. So there's the Trifid, kind of looks like a flower, and down below it, all this nebulosity down here. This is the Lagoon Nebula, which there's so much nebulosity there that it's almost hard to make the object out there, but it's kind of lost in all these gases around it. So this is the Lagoon Nebula and Trifid Nebula, M20 and M8, very popular objects to look at this time of year. And this is the Rubens view of it, and you can see quite an amazing view of this area of the sky. You're looking towards the center of the galaxy. You're looking towards the constellation Sagittarius here, and you're looking towards the center of the galaxy. So there's lots of stuff to look at here. Amazing view from the Rubin telescope. So we've got the Grand Telescopio is the biggest telescope in the world. We have these other telescopes that are doing all this great work. But there are even larger telescopes that are being looked at. The superscopes, or extremely large telescopes, ELTs, sometimes they're called. One project that has been underway has been the 30-meter telescope. So this is 3 times bigger than something like the Grand Telescopio. And so this is originally planned for Mauna Kea in Hawaii. This is a giant telescope, 30 meters in diameter, almost 100 feet. We're talking about the Hooker telescope in early part of the 20th century, 100 inches. This is almost 100 feet in diameter, made up of almost 500 hexagon segments all put together to form this giant mirror. And so this is a really cool project. Unfortunately, right now there's a lot of uncertainty with federal funding. You know, NSF, the National Science Foundation, they're talking about budget cuts. And so this telescope has been delayed for a variety of reasons, problems with the site on Mauna Kea, construction delays. And so the construction on this is kind of paused at this moment, and it actually might end up canceled, because at the moment the National Science Foundation has 2 giant observatories on its plate, and at least if these budget cuts go through, they won't be able to afford both of them. So what's the other big telescope that they're working on? Well, that's this one, the Giant Magellan telescope, and this is under construction. The mirrors are being built, so this is much further along than the 30-meter telescope, and so this probably was the one that's going to go forward. And if everything continues on the schedule and on budget, this would open in 2029. So about 4 years from now, this giant telescope it'll be located in Chile, or that's where it's being built right now, Las Cabanas Observatory in Chile. This is the GMT, Giant Magellan Telescope. And this is an unusual design. It's made up of 7. So you've got 7 8.4 meter diameter mirrors that are put together in a shape that kind of looks like a flower. And when it's all together and operating, it will be able to resolve objects that are the equivalent of a telescope is 25.4 meters in diameter. So not quite as big as the 30-meter, but still pretty close. This is pretty gigantic, much larger than the Grand Telescopio in the Canary Islands. So possibly in 2029, this will take the title as the biggest telescope in the world. And so this is again, the Giant Magellan Telescope. And I've got a little video here, a little animation that kind of shows you the telescope, what it might look like when it's done. And the mirrors kind of all used together, they make a much larger telescope. Remember correctly, the design of this is known as a Gregorian. It's a Gregorian telescope. It's got a little secondary mirror at the top that's kind of concave shape. And so this is a big structure, and all these telescope mirrors have to be aligned perfectly in order for them to operate properly. And so There's lots of computer controls in the back behind these mirrors that can move them around and keep them in focus in exactly the right place that they need to be. And so this is very complicated to have this giant structure and yet have everything align perfectly. But this is what it would look like. And that's another big innovation with these giant telescopes is that you can see the laser beams going out. This is what they call adaptive optics. The laser beams form artificial stars in the sky, and you can look at that and see how the atmosphere will move them around a little bit. They'll distort the little artificial stars. They can use that to move the mirrors around to cancel out some of the fluctuations of the atmosphere. And so you get kind of almost space telescope quality images from the ground. And that's been a big innovation there too, adaptive or active optics, that's sometimes called. And you can get really great images. So that's going to be a big telescope, but once again, the Europeans didn't want to be outdone. So they started building a project that is called the Extremely Large Telescope, ELT. And they're building this in Chile, and it also is scheduled for a 2029 completion date. So you can see there's kind of a race here going on between the Giant Magellan Telescope and the ELT here. Who will make it there first? I'm not sure. But this is the Extremely Large Telescope. How big is this? It's 40 meters. So this is going to be 40-meter diameter telescope. Have over 1,000 little segments that are going to be pieced together to form a 40-meter wide telescope. You can see the scale here. You can see the team laid out a whole bunch of hexagons to give you an idea how big the mirror is. But it's, even though it's big, it's very thin, only 50 millimeters in thickness. So extremely large, but extremely thin mirror here. So here we have the size of that mirror. How big is this going to be? Well, here's a little diagram that shows you the ELT on the left. You can see the VLT is there next to it, and there's a Statue of Liberty to give you an idea of the scale of this thing. It's going to be a gigantic dome to house this giant telescope. So it's going to be a huge structure, 40 meters in diameter. And so here's a little video that, whoops. Let's see if we can get this little video to run here. Gives a little overview of the telescope. So, so they got their approval to go ahead with that project, and as I said, there were some delays, but they were able to, hopefully we'll be able to open this in 2029. Now, we've been mentioning mostly all of these actually have been optical telescopes, but of course there are other types of telescopes, and so here's an interesting project. This is a radio telescope called the SKA. That's called the Square Kilometer Array because it's literally going to be a kilometer across, kilometer square, 1 square kilometer area, and they're going to be these little radio dishes are located in South Africa and Australia, and they're hoping that by maybe 2028, 2029, this radio telescope will be able to start operation. And this will be really, really nice because radio waves are big, and it's hard to get high resolution with radio waves because radio waves are so big. But if you make your telescope big enough, then you start to get some decent resolution. And so that's the whole object of this. The SKA observatory will get going here. Of course, a lot of people are familiar with our space telescopes, and here's just one example. The Hubble Space Telescope is probably the most famous telescope there is these days, but it's not very big. The Space Telescope is only 96 inches in diameter, 2.4 meters. And so, but this was a big step up from what was being done in the past, and so this is one of the most productive telescopes in history. Just amazing amount of work that has been done with this particular telescope. But obviously, it's now quite old. It's been there up in orbit for what, 35 years or more at this point. And so we wanted to build a larger telescope to expand on the work of the Hubble Space Telescope. And so this is the Webb Space Telescope, relatively new. Was launched on Christmas Day in 2021. It's 6.5 meters in diameter, so a much larger instrument than the Hubble Space Telescope. And this is an infrared telescope. It's doing most of its work in the infrared. And you need that. You need to have that because if you want to study the most distant galaxies in the universe, you got to use the infrared in order to be able to see them well enough. So this is 6.5 meters in diameter, and that's really quite large. We don't have rockets that are big enough to hold a 6.5 meter diameter mirror. So how the heck do you get this into space? Well, you got to fold it up. It's kind of a big origami project, and they spent years designing this this whole structure here that folds up, and you stuff it inside a rocket and you launch it. And there were lots of delays and lots of unknowns. No one had ever done anything like this, but they did their work perfectly because once it was launched in 2021, it unfolded perfectly and has been in operation now since 2021 and has been sending back some really spectacular images. To give you an idea of the size of this, here's the Webb Space Telescope team standing there with a full-size model of the telescope. And this gives you an idea how big the mirror is compared to Hubble. Hubble is there on the left, and there's the Webb Space Telescope primary mirror there for size scale, about the equivalent of about 256 inches in diameter. So this is going to be a very productive telescope, and so there we have some of the biggest telescopes in the world, and so I hope you enjoyed that little view of that. And if if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about these telescopes or telescopes in general. And so there we go.
All right. Thank you, Kevin, for another great presentation. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. So we are going to do a Q&A session. How it's going to work is for people here, you're going to raise your hand and keep it raised and kind of wave it about, because my vision without my distance glasses in the dark is about as good as the Jurassic Park T-Rex. So if you stop moving, you just kind of become a shadowy figure as it gets darker. And I lose you. That being said, online people, you get it easy. You just type in your questions. So I'm going to start things off. Also, for people here, you're going to use the mic, because chances are if you have a question, someone at home might have the same question, but not be brave enough to ask it. So I'm going to start out with the first online question, which it was, what is the largest telescope you have ever used?
Ooh, good question. Probably the largest telescope I've used is probably a 28-inch. Big Newtonian, Dobsonian type telescope was probably about 28 inches. And that was probably up at Stellafane.
I was about to say
Vermont.
Stellafane. That sounds like a
there's
Stellafane thing.
Very nice. There's a very nice. For those of you who don't know, there's a very nice summertime astronomy convention called Stellafane. It's been going on since the 1920s, and amateur astronomers gather up there and bring their telescopes. And I think it was 28 inches was the largest one I've seen through. Yeah. I know there are some people have been able to use. There's a telescope at, I mentioned McDonald Observatory. I believe there's a telescope that's maybe 60 or 62 inches in diameter, and I think you can, if you know the right people, you can get some time on that. Mount Wilson, also the 60-inch telescope. I think the public is able to look through that. Also the Hooker, the 100-inch Hooker telescope. I believe it's possible to be able to use that for amateurs, to be able to use that, I believe. You know?
Yeah, one of our member clubs, Northwest Jersey Amateur Astronomers, they actually have a 50-inch that is back in Blairstown now.
Yes. Okay.
So if you're interested, do go onto our website. There's more information about their club there. And I see we got a question out here.
Just wondering, for the purposes of a scale, so you said the telescope from 400 years ago was 14x, right?
Yeah.
How many x's are modern day telescopes?
That's a little bit hard to answer, because almost all the modern telescopes don't have eyepieces. So with amateur telescopes here that we have and that are in use, you figure out the magnification by dividing the focal length of the telescope by the focal length of your eyepiece. And so, if you have a telescope that's 4,000 millimeters long and you use a 10 millimeter eyepiece there, you get a magnification of about 400 or so.
But if you change the eyepiece, it changes.
Yeah, then you put a different eyepiece and you get a different magnification. But for these big telescopes, they don't have eyepieces, and so you can't really calculate the magnification quite. It's more about, and I said earlier, the more important thing, especially for professional telescopes, is not magnification. It's how much light you can gather. And the more light you can gather, the fainter objects you can see, and usually the farther that you can see. And so we're getting to the point where these big telescopes are large enough where you can see almost as far as you possibly can see. You're seeing light that has been traveling since something like 200,000 or 300,000 years after the Big Bang. And so you're really seeing almost to the edge as far as we can see, at this point, so it's quite incredible.
Right. There was a question online, bouncing off of that last online question. What is the size of your daily driver telescope, if you have one?
Oh, yeah. I myself, I think the largest telescope that I own is only about 8 inches in diameter. But, I'm a member of one of the clubs up here, and so I have access to a 14-inch, so I don't really need to have a very large telescope at home, because I can use this one up here at Jenny Jump, So my largest telescope is 8 inches.
Right. Was there another question out here?
In diameter.
Bueller? I don't even have crickets today. Apparently they all went to bed early with the heat. All right. So our next online question was: is the image broadcasted matching what is projected on site? And yes, we do put an image of the presentation online. So in addition to a little window that shows our speaker. So yes, I just figured I'd go over that real quick. The next question is actually, for the adaptive optics, are all the mirrors ground the same, or are they all ground for where they are relative to their position in the grid?
Oh, yeah. It depends on the design of the telescope. In some cases, they are all identical, but I would imagine probably like the Keck telescope and I believe the ELT as well. Each segment is kind of unique and it forms a whole shape there. And as the video mentioned that, you can adjust, you have little computer controlled motors back behind each little segment and you can move them around to fine tune the shape of the mirror. And you can move those around and eliminate some of the distortions of the atmosphere. And that gives you this great, very clear view, almost, like I said, almost space telescope like images. Yeah.
All right. Questions? All right, so online people, if you have any last minute questions, do get them in. And I say this now just because by the time they actually get that message, we're already a couple minutes into the future because that's how stream delay works. While we're waiting for that, since I haven't seen any questions, if you have one, do raise your hand, like I said, and I'll come over, bring you the mic. But just to go over the safety briefing again, because a couple people might have snuck in, I think, during the presentation. If you need to use the restroom, that is the porta potty in the back. It is illuminated by red for ease of finding in the dark. We also have a little museum and gift shop area. I will be manning that after the talk. When we go to leave, do use your headlights because we don't want to get run over or see anyone get run over. That's way too much paperwork that ain't no one got time for that. In addition, any flashlights or lights we're using to walk around, please do keep those pointed towards the ground. We don't need to accidentally blind people by the flashlight raves. This is a state park. State park rules do apply. It is carry in, carry out as far as trash and whatnot, so do try and be mindful of that. Once again, I still don't have my distance glasses. I've set them down somewhere, and I'll find them later. But if we have any telescopes set up, there is a volunteer who is manning that telescope. Do feel free to ask them questions. What are they looking at through the scope? Although that being said, it is still a bit overcast.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have to look outside of the tarp to actually see that. So, last chance for any questions out here. All right. Since online also seems to have exhausted all their questions,
Okay.
once again, thank you everyone who has joined us here. Thank you, Kevin, for a great presentation. We need to get you back here more often when your job allows, because life be like that sometime. With that being said, everyone have a great night, clear skies, and good seeing.